Hello everyone, welcome to our channel that takes you on an exciting journey through real-life mysteries and stories solved in the most intriguing ways. If you're a fan of captivating narratives and tales that make you rethink the world around you, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to support us by liking and subscribing so you won't miss any of our new content. We're thrilled to share this special story with you today. The story of Peter Kürten, the serial killer and vampire of Düsseldorf. Brutal and shocking crimes. Peter Kürten was born on May 26, 1883, in the town of Mulheim am Rhein, a suburb near Cologne in Germany. He grew up in a harsh environment with extremely difficult social and economic circumstances. His father worked in a simple job, but he was violent and an alcoholic, which negatively affected the family. The family lived in a small, overcrowded house where Peter was one of 13 children. In this poor, cramped home, Peter and his siblings were subjected to abuse and physical punishment by their father. Reports indicate that his father was abusive not only to the children but also to their mother, regularly assaulting her in front of them. From an early age, Peter began to exhibit abnormal and troubling behavior. One documented story suggests that, as a young child, he formed a friendship with a neighbor who worked as a butcher. This man taught him the cruelty of animals and how to torture them, which sowed the seeds of his later sadistic behaviors. At a very young age, Peter allegedly started killing animals intentionally and enjoyed watching them bleed, developing an obsession with the idea of controlling life and death. This period of his life is considered a significant early sign of his violent tendencies, which later escalated into horrific crimes. In school, Peter was not an academically outstanding child. He tended to rebel and engage in disruptive behavior. It is said that he ran away from home several times due to the abuse he suffered from his father. During one of these escapes, he joined a group of older boys and began participating in petty crimes, leading to his early encounters with the authorities. When Kürten reached adolescence, he began to show a stronger inclination toward violent and deviant behavior. Some sources suggest that the abuse and violence he endured at home contributed to building a character filled with anger and a desire for revenge, traits that later became evident in his criminal life. Peter Kürten's beginnings were marked by poverty, violence, and cruelty, which led him to grow up in an environment devoid of love or emotional support. These harsh conditions played a significant role in shaping his disturbed personality, which ultimately led him to become one of the most infamous killers in history. Peter Kürten faced significant problems with both school and society from his childhood, and these issues were part of the troubled life he began in a home filled with violence and neglect. When he entered school, it quickly became apparent that he was unable to adapt to the environment. He struggled with concentration and always seemed restless and uninterested in learning. Due to his poor family circumstances and modest appearance, he was ridiculed and bullied by his classmates, which further fueled his anger and resentment. Peter's response to bullying was not through crying or withdrawal but through violence and rebellion. He began fighting with his classmates regularly, using force to respond to any provocation. These aggressive behaviors also extended to his teachers, as he constantly challenged them and refused to follow instructions. He quickly gained a reputation as a troublesome and disruptive student. He didn't complete his homework and often skipped classes without permission. Despite this, no serious attempts were made to rehabilitate or support him emotionally. Instead, he was frequently expelled from school as a quick solution to his problems. Outside of school, Peter was not much different. He began escaping from home at a young age to avoid the constant violence from his father. During these periods away from his family, he engaged in illegal activities with other older children. He learned from them how to steal and pickpocket, starting to commit these crimes himself. Initially, these were small crimes like stealing food or money to meet his basic needs, but over time they became bolder and more organized. Peter was known in his community as an unstable and disruptive child. He constantly caused trouble and behaved rudely toward others. He didn't respect other people's property and often tampered with or stole it. Due to his bad reputation and aggressive behavior, people started avoiding him, which led to his further isolation from his social environment. This isolation made him feel unwelcome, increasing his anger and desire for revenge on everyone around him. These problems compounded, and with no family or social support, Peter began to sink deeper into violent thoughts. He found no environment in school or society that could help him change. Instead, the experiences of being expelled, bullied, and isolated worsened his condition. Over time, these childhood issues became the foundation for his disturbed personality and criminal behavior. At the age of 9, Peter Kürten was playing with two of his classmates near the Rhine River. During their play, he deliberately pushed them into the water, knowing full well that they couldn't swim. He left them to drown while he stood by and watched, not attempting to offer any help. The two children drowned in the water, and the incident was considered a tragic accident at the time. This event was a major turning point in Peter Kürten's life, as he experienced, for the first time, the feeling of control over others' lives and deaths. There was no formal investigation that pointed to his involvement in the incident, and it remained secret for a long time. This early experience laid the foundation for his violent behavior, which later developed into horrific crimes. The first known murder committed by Peter Kürten occurred in 1913 when he was 30 years old. He carefully selected his first victim, a young girl named Christine Klein, who was 9 years old. That night, Kürten sneaked into the Klein family home, located in the Mulheim area of Germany, with the intent to steal. While inside the house, he noticed the young girl sleeping in her bed. Instead of simply stealing from the family, he decided to kill her. He quietly approached her and strangled her until she lost consciousness. He then cut her throat with a knife he had brought with him. The murder was brutal and shocking, leaving the girl lying in a pool of blood with no sign of remorse. Kürten left the house quietly and returned the next day to blend in with the crowds that had gathered around the house after the body was discovered. He enjoyed watching people's reactions and their feelings of fear and sadness. Later, He admitted that this crime sparked a strong feeling of control within him, increasing his thirst for murder. This first crime marked the beginning of a series of horrific murders he would later commit, clearly showing his sadistic nature and fascination with violence. Peter Kürten's second crime took place shortly after his first, indicating a rapid escalation in his thirst for violence and murder. The victim this time was a 17-year-old woman named Gertrude Franken, a young woman who was walking alone one night in a remote area of Düsseldorf. That night, Kürten was wandering, searching for a new victim. When he saw her, he approached her calmly and began a friendly conversation to gain her trust. But soon, his intentions changed, and he attacked her suddenly. He pulled out a knife and stabbed her multiple times in different areas of her body. His attacks were brutal and swift, making it impossible for the victim to defend herself or escape. After ensuring that she was dead, Kürten left the body at the crime scene and walked away. He didn't stop at the act of murder itself but also relished the excitement and power he felt while committing his crime. In the days following the murder, Kürten followed the news regarding Gertrude's death and enjoyed the state of fear that gripped the residents of the area. This crime confirmed to him that he was capable of getting away with murder, further boosting his confidence in continuing to commit more horrific crimes. Peter Kürten's third crime was more violent and organized, showing an evolution in his criminal methods and an increased thirst for blood. The victim this time was a young woman named Ida Reinhold, a housemaid. The crime took place in 1929, when Kürten began carrying out a series of brutal crimes that terrorized the residents of Düsseldorf. On the night of the crime, Ida was walking alone down a quiet street after finishing her work. Kürten was wandering the area, watching people's movements and looking for a suitable victim. When he noticed Ida, he decided to follow her quietly until she reached a secluded spot. There, he attacked her suddenly. Using a long knife, Kürten stabbed her several times in the chest and abdomen. His attacks were precise and lethal, focusing on stabbing her in vital areas. After Ida fell to the ground lifeless, Kürten stood for a moment, coldly watching her body, enjoying the sight of the blood flowing profusely. But this time, Kürten did not stop at just killing her. In a disturbing escalation of his sadism, he drank the victim's blood directly from her wounds. This act earned him the later nickname, the Vampire of Düsseldorf. After finishing his crime, he left the body where it was and fled, confident that he would not be caught. Ida Reinhold's murder caused panic in Düsseldorf, especially after the police realized that there was a serial killer targeting women in a brutal manner. However, Kürten managed to escape once again, which increased his confidence and encouraged him to continue committing more horrific crimes. Peter Kürten's fourth crime was a continuation of his violent behavior, where he showed even more planning and a greater urge to kill. The victim this time was a 19-year-old girl named Maria Hahn, who lived a peaceful life and had no enemies. The incident occurred in 1929, the same year that Kürten committed most of his crimes. Kürten had met Maria by deceiving her, pretending that he was interested in her and wanted a serious relationship. He attracted her with his words and friendly demeanor, which seemed harmless. After a short time of meetings, he invited her on a walk to a secluded area outside of Düsseldorf. Maria, trusting him, agreed without suspecting his true intentions. Once they reached the location, a secluded field surrounded by trees, Kürten's behavior suddenly changed. He began to attack her brutally. He assaulted her with all his strength, using a knife to stab her several times in different areas of her body. Maria screamed and tried to defend herself, but he was stronger and more determined. He delivered the stabs in a savage manner, causing her to die slowly, which gave him the sense of control and sadism he craved. After confirming Maria's death, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he sat next to her body for a while. He later confessed that he felt a strange pleasure as he observed the scene, enjoying the destruction and violence he had caused. He also mentioned that he had considered returning to the spot later to check that the body was still there. After finishing his crime, he left the body in the field and left the area as if nothing had happened. Maria's body was discovered after several days, showing signs of extreme violence, which further terrified the residents of Düsseldorf, who realized that their city had become the stage for the crimes of a dangerous serial killer. This crime clearly demonstrated the planning that Kürten had begun to follow, as well as his enjoyment of the violence that fed him in a pathological way, encouraging him to continue committing more crimes with the same brutality. Peter Kürten's fifth crime was one of his most brutal, targeting a young boy named Karl Berger, who was 8 years old. The crime occurred in 1929, during a period when the city of Düsseldorf was living in fear due to a series of crimes that the police had not yet solved. One day, Kürten saw young Karl playing alone in the street near his home. Kürten noticed that the child was alone and decided to make him his next target. He approached him kindly, using his deceptive manner to gain his trust. He promised the child that he would take him on a walk and give him some sweets, which the boy accepted without suspecting anything. Kürten led the boy to a secluded area near a forest, where no one could see or hear them. Once they arrived at the location, Kürten revealed his true face. He began to assault the child, strangling him until he lost consciousness. But instead of stopping, Kürten continued with his brutal actions, taking out a knife and stabbing Karl several times in his small body. Kürten acted coldly, as if the sight of the blood and the suffering of the victim gave him some kind of sadistic pleasure. He not only killed the boy, but he also continued to manipulate his body, reflecting an extraordinary cruelty and savagery. After finishing, he left the body in the same spot, without attempting to hide or bury it. Karl's body was found after several days, and it was in a horrific condition that shocked the community. The murder stirred the anger of the residents and increased pressure on the police to uncover the identity of the killer. However, Kürten continued to evade justice, which encouraged him to continue his crimes. In 1930, Peter Kürten committed his sixth crime, which was more brutal than any previous one. His victim was a woman named Helga Hoffmann, in her early 30s, who was walking alone down a street in Düsseldorf in the evening. As Helga was returning home, Kürten, who was wandering the area looking for a new victim, spotted her. He approached her cautiously, smiling, and started talking to her in a friendly manner, as if she were just a stranger on the street. Helga, with no suspicions, responded politely. He invited her to walk with him in a direction away from sight, where the road was empty of passers-by. Then, in an unexpected moment, Kürten suddenly turned the situation around. He pushed her to the ground and pulled out a knife from his coat, stabbing her repeatedly in her chest and abdomen. The attack was fast and violent, and Helga screamed, trying to escape, but she couldn't resist him. The stabs were deep and quick, and with every strike, he felt more control and dominance. After confirming that she was dead, he didn't go far. He stayed for a moment next to her body, watching it as if he enjoyed what he had done. The stillness and calmness that overcame him as he looked at the lifeless body had a profound effect on him. Finally, he left the body where it was and silently walked away, enjoying his superiority over life and death. The news of the crime spread quickly in Düsseldorf, and fear grew in people's hearts. This attack marked the beginning of many consecutive crimes, making Kürten a serial killer, difficult for the police to track or catch. The story of the woman who survived an attack by Peter Kürten was one of the crucial moments in revealing his identity. This woman had been a potential victim of his, but she survived thanks to her ability to escape his grasp. In 1930, Peter Kürten had already committed numerous brutal crimes that instilled terror in the city of Düsseldorf. One day, Kürten chose a woman who was walking alone in one of the city's streets. He started talking to her and, as usual, earned her trust, asking her to accompany him to a secluded place where he planned to carry out his attack. When they reached a remote area, Kürten revealed his true intentions. As soon as they arrived at the location, he attacked her suddenly. He pushed her to the ground and started physically assaulting her. As he had done in his previous crimes, he began to sexually assault her. The woman screamed and tried to escape, but Kürten had a firm grip on her. However, during a moment when Kürten was distracted by her, the woman managed to outsmart him and kick him, which gave her a chance to escape. The woman ran with all her strength to the nearest inhabited area and succeeded in reaching a nearby house, where she requested help. She was taken to the hospital in a state of shock, but she survived the brutal attack. After the incident, the woman was able to provide detailed information about the appearance of her attacker. Despite the trauma she had experienced, she managed to recall key details about Kürten's appearance, such as his clothing and general demeanor. This information helped the authorities narrow their investigation. Thanks to this crucial testimony, more focused investigations were launched. Additionally, this incident played a key role in linking the separate crimes that had been occurring in the city and in identifying the serial killer. Based on this information, investigators began to connect this crime with the many others that had taken place in Düsseldorf, which bore similar patterns of violence and brutality. These crimes ranged from savage killings to sexual assaults, and the police had initially failed to link them due to the random nature of the attacks. But now, after the woman's testimony, investigators began to focus their efforts on suspects in this series of crimes. The investigation led to further evidence pointing to Peter Kürten. The police began to monitor the Düsseldorf area more closely and searched for individuals with a similar criminal history. During this time, Kürten began to feel the pressure of the growing investigation surrounding the crimes he had committed. Peter Kürten was arrested after committing his final crime in 1930. The last victim was a young man named Friedrich Fischmann, a factory worker, who was walking alone late at night in a remote neighborhood. Kürten, who was roaming the area searching for a new victim, spotted Fischmann. He approached him and invited him to talk, attempting to gain his trust. Over time, the conversation turned into a sudden attack. Kürten pushed Friedrich to a secluded area, where he attacked him violently. He restrained his hands and then began sexually assaulting him, which provoked a fierce resistance from Friedrich. During the struggle, an unexpected incident occurred. Friedrich managed to escape but was seriously injured in the process. However, Kürten continued to pursue him, leaving clear evidence of the crime. Despite his injuries, Friedrich managed to run to the nearest house and ask for help. He was taken to the hospital, where he was treated for his wounds. Following Friedrich's testimony, which was very detailed about the appearance of the attacker and the nature of the assault, the police began to investigate more closely. This time, the testimony became the decisive factor that focused the investigation on Kürten. Evidence collected from the crime scene, such as blood traces and pieces of the attacker's clothing, further raised suspicions about the killer's identity. Later, Peter Kürten was arrested after being identified by witnesses, including Friedrich Fischmann, who was able to identify him as the attacker. When interrogated, Kürten confessed to committing a series of horrific crimes. He provided investigators with precise details about each crime, admitting to killing 9 people and assaulting many others. His attempts to evade his confessions were unsuccessful, as all the evidence and testimonies were against him. He was later put on trial, where the cases against him were conclusive and led to his conviction. Peter Kürten's trial was one of the most famous trials in Germany at the time, as the crimes he committed shocked the community and created a state of terror in Düsseldorf. After his arrest in 1930, he was put on trial at the Düsseldorf court in 1931. At the beginning of the trial, Kürten confessed to committing many of the brutal crimes that had shaken the city. He admitted to killing 9 victims, as well as committing numerous sexual assaults and acts of torture. His defense attorneys initially tried to argue that he was mentally ill, claiming that he suffered from psychological disorders that made him not responsible for his actions. However, this defense was not convincing enough. During the trial, Kürten provided gruesome and detailed accounts of each crime, as if they were acts he felt no remorse for. He admitted that he enjoyed controlling his victims and feeling the power during the commission of the crimes. His testimony described how he selected his victims, how he would sneak into isolated areas to attack them, then sexually assault them before killing them. He also mentioned how he enjoyed the suffering of his victims before ending their lives, explaining that he took pleasure in the sense of control he had during those moments. The court also reviewed the testimonies of the survivors of his attacks, who gave details about how they managed to escape or survive his grip. Each of them had their own story, which helped document the crimes Kürten committed and strengthen the evidence against him.